Stop the cap.
Don't forget to pick up my new book. It's on Amazon. The link is in the description box. So, well, I probably won't make this video about me dropping the new book, Understanding White Supremacy. Covered on a lot of topics there. Many of the stuff you've heard me say before. You've heard me say, I mean, the Black Matriarchy, that book was so big that I touched on a lot of it, in that book, because I had to address white people's pathological behavior. I had to address, how they think. The Understanding White Supremacy book has a lot to do with the conversation with a white guy, and him and I going back and forth, and it really highlights, like, when you see like his comments, you've all seen it before. You've seen it in the YouTube comment sections. It's the way that white people think that is just, it's you got two classes of white people. You got obviously the oligarchs, the muhaha white people, and then you got your degular white people, right? Your white proletariat, right? And this goes back to Richard Spencer and the statement that he made, where he went on, I forget, the guy that's the UFC fighter, went on his channel and was talking about how he's kind of, getting tired of the conversation, because he's like, it just all comes down to, white people are well behaved. We score higher on the L stat. White people are kind of like, they look at things like when you're talking to a Christian and they try to use the Bible in and of itself as evidence for God, right? Like you ask, okay, so why is this? And then they'll be like, well, look, it's just self-evident. And white people do the same thing when it comes to like the conditions in Europe, right? So they'll say, oh, well, look at Europe. Europe's awesome. Being completely ahistorical, ignoring the fact that Europe's wealth was built off of, the backs of the third world, right? The backs of the global south stealing wealth and resources. I talk about that all the time, right? They love to leave that part out. They love to pretend like there wasn't the age of exploration and colonialization, and that Europeans were just chilling in Europe, minding their own business, and that they came up with white conduct. And that's not what happened, right? So anyway, what inspired me to make this video, because I actually wasn't motivated to make a video to even promote my own goddamn book. How fucked up is that? But anyway, because, and it's because partially I'm tired of the conversation, because, when I boiled all the water out of the pot, okay, been online for years, went back and forth with people, looking what's going on now, the economy, Trump fucking everything up, just, you got a madman in the White House, and you got blocking, the Iranians are blocking the Strait of Hormuz. Trump went in and got himself involved and doesn't know how to get out of it. Again, we're in like the era of white arrogance. It's like white arrogance on top of the fact that white people are failing. The white proletariat, the white masses are failing. And I was just listening to a video, and the video is from, who is the video from? The video is from Classic Halo Commentary. So all he does is comment, and he plays Halo videos in the background. And so, and this is part of the problem when it comes to white people and their conversations. First off, white people spend too much time in their own echo chambers. Okay, especially like white conservative men. They literally believe them, we're awesome. We're white men. We're awesome. We built the world. We conquered the world. We did all this, and everybody should aspire to be us, right? And there's levels within the white community, right? You have white elites, right? And then you got like the white proletariat, right? You got the political class, all that, right? I talked about this with the image that I had of the kings, queens, nobles, and peasants. And now you have, the elites, and then you have the political class, and then you have the white collar class, and then you have the blue collar class, right? And so that's like the stratification within the white community. And the white elites have done a marvelous job. And I've talked about this with Bacon's Rebellion, and, how, I mean, even when it came to, black people being slaves, like that wasn't even established at that time, which I didn't even know. Like there was no like, oh, you're black, so you're a slave. It wasn't even like that. It was a lot more complex than that. But after Bacon's Rebellion, they made sure to establish, that that's what it was going to be. Hold on a second. Getting, I gotta open this sunroof because I'm getting a little hot. Oh, hold on. I don't know why Lith is playing in the background, but in any event, probably, oh yeah, because of all the Bluetooth shit I got going on. So, where was I at? Let me turn this off. So, what was I talking about? The stratification in the white community. Yeah, so you get a bunch of white men, and white men are weird when it comes to this, because there's a lot of white men who, okay, you're born and you're white male, and so you look around, you might be squarely in the middle class, you might be in the upper lower class, something like that, right? And you're given this script, they're told that, white men established society, and slavery happened, but, black people are low IQs, and, they're really fucked up, and we're not going to talk about the things that we did and, to damage the black community or any other community. We're just going to say, manifest destiny. We're the ones that are supposed to be running shit. And that's pretty much how it is. Right. And they don't really think about anything that they have historically done or even anything that they're currently doing, especially when you get into a lot of the religious evangelical type of white people. They have a very simple, first off, you already know what I think of religious people. Religious people tend not to be high IQ individuals. So, they have their Jesus, Christianity, God, moral compass, and we're the light of Christ and we represent the light of Christ. And then again, the Bible, it's an authoritarian structure. It's a top-down authoritarian structure. So they believe that if I walk in the light of Christ, and therefore God is right and Christianity is right and Jesus is right, and I believe in all of that, so therefore I have the right to violate other people's rights or make sure that everything is done my way because I'm doing things in accordance to the Bible, and that is the only way. Christ is king, yada yada, right? So this is how they think. Okay. And so, they walk out into the world and they have just a real, just not understanding anything, basic, generalized, like what sort of white supremacist way of thinking about the world, capitalism, where they are in relationship to everybody else. And that's all they think about. Right. And then again, this is the issue with like, media like Fox News and stuff like that basically, even with Elon Musk going up there and saying that, what did he say? Something like compassion is not our strength, it's our weakness or something like that. Right. So white people, what they've done, what the white elites have done is they've convinced regular white people that having compassion and coalescing into this sort of, population that looks out for each other is problematic, right? That's weakness, that it's every man for himself, personal responsibility to death, but capitalism to the death. There's those that sink and swim with the illusionary promise that, that you could be amongst the gods on Mount Olympus if you pull yourself up by the bootstraps and work hard enough. And so those that failed, because they didn't try hard enough. They didn't have the discipline. It's usually always, they try to make it a moral character flaw, like it's a character flaw. You're not successful, not because the system is unequal or unjust or fucked up. You're failing because you have a character flaw, right? And white people were absolutely comfortable with that sort of idea until, as we see with this current economy, now they're being affected by it. Because they don't know what to do with that thought. Because if a black guy is failing, it's because the nigga's a low IQ, nigga this, nigga that, blah, 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 blah. But when white guys are failing, it's because there's a conspiracy theory, there's a cabal, that is the reason as to why they are failing. Okay? And so, they really struggle with, that compassion part. And we can talk about, how that affects how white women view them, relationships and all that. We can talk about all that, right? Because they're losing white women. They're currently losing white women. All that trying to force white women's hand, and you're going to have our babies, and no matter what, and you can't have an abortion, and Handmaid's Tale type of shit. They done shot themselves in the foot, right? So then this goes into, their insecurities, status anxiety, sexual anxiety, when they see black men with white women, and even the stuff with the prom. You know what I mean? Again, I've said this before, that black people are the barometer for white people's success. As long as white people are ahead of black people, white people feel comfortable. If white people are doing worse than black people, then something is wrong with the universe. Thanos must have snapped his fingers or something. Something is wrong. Something is afoot, right? And this is how they operate. But in any event, I was listening to this video, this Halo commentary, and to me it's so superficial. And see, the thing is like, I already know that white people don't want to have real conversations, because it would bring up some very serious, uncomfortable truths when it comes to, their position in the world, what they currently believe, the things that were done, even understanding human psychology and behavior, which I always find interesting, because I'm like, y'all motherfuckers are the ones that came up with human psychology and behavior. But when you apply race to it, all of a sudden the rules change. All of a sudden the rules change, anytime, let a white guy be mentally ill, schizophrenic, whatever, it's, oh, he's got a mental illness. Let a white guy have an addiction. Oh, it's a mental illness. It's a mental illness. We got to change the DSM-5. It's a mental illness. But let a black guy, let DeCarlos Brown stab Irina Zarutska on the train when he should have been institutionalized, and they've defunded, mental health care since 1960, since John F. Kennedy was president. And it's because blacks are evil. It's because blacks want to breathe up all the white man's air or some shit like that, right? There's no such thing as mental health issues when it comes to black people. Black people are just evil. And they try to use this narrative to try to reinforce, not only what they already believe about black people, but to exonerate themselves from the crimes against humanity, specifically against black people. Right. And the way that, they've created this whole system of inequality, right, which creates problems. It creates problems both in the white community and the black community. But because America is not a homogeneous society, because I was watching a video and it got taken down. I wish it didn't get taken down. Probably got taken down for hate speech, which I think is bullshit. I'm like, nah, let these niggas speak. What the fuck? Let them speak. You see, because this is the shit that they deny. When they get all comfortable and they come online and they telling how they feel and I'm speaking my truth. Yeah, go ahead. Speak your white boy truth. Speak your white boy truth. Go ahead and speak that shit. And so they'll go up there and they'll speak their truth. And I'm like, oh, so this is how you think. Oh, this is what you think it is. And you start seeing all the glaring holes, in their ideology. Right. So, the guy that came up with the video, he said, white people, he said, morals are for friends only. And that's a very dangerous thing to say, because like I said, if you're going to have rules for thee, but not for me, well, at that point, there's no reason. Black people should just crash out at that point. Right. Because that's some Machiavellian shit. That's the Prince type shit, like where I'm beholden to rules and concepts of moralities and all these principles and shit, but you're not. You only reserve that for white people, nigga. Fuck you, right? That's grounds to crash out. If what's his name? Carmelo Anthony stabbed. What was the guy's name? What's the guy's name? What the twins? Which was it? Hunter Metcalf? Which one did he stab? I forget which brother he stabbed. But anyway, stabbed one of the Metcalf twins. Well, if he felt threatened, that's all there is to it. He stabbed him in the chest, so that's what the fuck it is. Because we're operating on a different set of principles. We're operating on hood principles. We're operating on street code. We don't operate on whatever the fucking law is that white people set up and they talk about, what justifies self. We don't operate on that. Okay. In other words, you end up with two different Americas, and you can't use, once people recognize that it's a dual system, Once people recognize that, then you can't sit there and try to use your moral compass to talk about the other group or the other side being amoral, because they don't operate on your principles. You know what I mean? They operate on some Klingon shit. You know what I mean? They operate on some Bushido code or some shit like that. They operate on a completely different system. So that video is very similar to this video about the Halo commentary, whatever he calls his channel. Because I'm listening to him bitch and whine. He's talking about high trust, low trust societies. A lot of the white nationalists in the comment section are like, I like that, low trust individuals, right? Which is code word for niggas, right? So he's talking about Orlando. I'm very familiar with Orlando. Okay, and he's talking about how shit's locked up in Orlando and this, that, and the third. Florida, as I've said before, Florida is one of those states, and I don't know if it has the most wealth inequality, but to me, as somebody who grew up in the Northeast, and how like you have the cities, and then kind of as you move out of the cities, you get into like the quasi burbs, then you get into the burbs, and then you get into the rural area. The further away from the city you go, the more rural it gets, right? Where like in France, it's the opposite, right? The closer you are to Paris, the wealthier it is. And then as you move out, like that's where the ghetto is. The ghetto's in the farmland. The ghetto's in the rural areas. It's not like that in the States. Further away from the city you get, that the more that's where the burbs are, because of the whole, 1956 Federal Highway Commission Act. Once they built the highways, people could move out, build bigger houses in what used to be farmland. And, they could do all of that. And, live in basically what you see as the American suburbs, right? And they commute and they get in their car and they drive to work. And then this is why in the 90s and the 80s, this is why the inner cities they were abandoned. You know what I mean? Like when you look at movies like Last Action Hero, with the guy with the glass eye and shit, I just shot somebody and I did it on purpose. Like the way that they depict New York City in the 80s and the 90s in movies, when you go back and you look at these movies, it just looks like, Skid Row, right? Like when you look at like the South Bronx and shit like that, like it looked like somebody literally dropped a bomb on that motherfucker. Okay, this is way before there was development and gentrification and all that stuff, right? So I'm listening to this video, he's bitching about, a low trust society, and like things like, for example, Japan is a high trust society. There's been people who's argued that, the Scandinavian countries are high trust society, and it's only ruined, when the minorities show up, right? And here's the problem with much of what is being said as I'm listening to this video. First off, the first thing he's complaining about is he's complaining about theft. And I'm like, people steal when they're broke. You set up a society where, as we already know, people are struggling. They can't pay $2,000 rent. There's the jobs, they're not hiring. I think, we have college graduates. They have the same unemployment rate as people who didn't go to college, which is a first. You have, what else is there? The job market, right? There's been no net growth in jobs, right? So like, this is what happens when people don't have jobs. See, the problem with white people is they try to make everything about morality and Jesus and God. And they somehow magically think, at least when it comes to everybody else, that if you take away the resources, it doesn't matter. You should still be a moral and justice and righteous person, despite the fact that you're going without. Right? And I'm like, all right, motherfucker, like, let's see you do that shit. See, what white people try to do is they try to obscure and try to hide the dusty white people. They try to hide the struggling white people. They try to hide the crystal meth. They try to hide the hepatitis C, right? They try to hide their dysfunction in their homes. They just want them to go away. The bottom, when the bottom falls out in the white community, they try to make it like they don't exist. They just disappear in obscurity. They don't let the bottom represent them, but they'll make the bottom in any other community represent any other community, right? They'll sit there and they'll find the dirtiest Indians and say that represents the entirety of the Indian community. They'll go and they'll find, black gangbangers shooting at each other, right? Shootout, middle of the street, right? And then that represents the majority of the black community. They'll go and they'll find, the freaking Muslim guy with literally TNT on his chest, screaming Allahu Akbar, and they'll be like, "See, I told you, all the Muslims, they're all terrorists and whatnot." And then when it comes to the Asians, the Asians are model minorities when they're using them against black people, but then when it's just Asian people and white people, they'll swear up and down that the Asian people, they bring disease and COVID and SARS and all this other shit, right? But when it comes to white people are literally just the quintessential, wholesome, family, and that's just what it is, and that's what majority of white people are, because white people are just more hardworking than everybody else. They pull themselves up by the bootstraps, and everybody should aspire, to be white people, your average white person, right? Because this is the idea that this is what the elites sold to white America. And again, for a while, like, you got to remember, you had slavery, right? Which is essentially people working for nothing, right? And then it's like, okay, well, if we can't have, free labor, this is what the white elite said, well, we want cheap labor. So then what did they do? They went and they got the Irish immigrants and the Italian immigrants and all these people coming from Eastern Europe and all this shit, right? And they brought them over, right? And they brought over Germans and shit, like, brought them all over. And then they had them working in coal mining towns, and they were paying them in script. Where is the white unity in that? It didn't exist. This whole idea of white unity didn't exist. Again, in Europe, it was kings, queens, nobles, and peasants. And most of the white people are serfs. Most of the white people come from serfdom. You do not come from this ethereal, magical, European continent that is, essentially looks like, Rivendell in Lord of the Rings and shit, where there's just a bunch of, Liv Taylors walking around, and calling, in the cows, speaking some Gaelish language. This is the ideas that these guys have in their fucking head of what it is to have an exclusively white nation. The funny thing is this guy's bitching, right? And I know he's using, low trust individuals or low trust society, and he kind of used the terms interchangeably. But I'm saying, it's always funny to me how, like, white Americans, white nationalist Americans will talk about Europe and how Europe is, these especially these majority white countries, and why can't we have that? And they're busting nuts all over the screen. But then they ignore the fact that those societies are socialist societies. Those societies have robust safety nets. Not only that, but their taxes are high as fuck. I know white people who've gone to Europe, and they have all consistently come back and they say, if you just want to be a regular person, Europe is the place to live. But if you actually want to build wealth, you can't do it in Europe. They'll tax you to high hell. You can't do it. You know what I mean? So the thing is like what I recognize, and I talked about this in the book, with the people want certain inputs, or they want certain outputs, but they don't want to put in the inputs. And it's like, so for example, if you want cheap labor, right, understand that you're going to have to import people from the second and third world if you want cheap labor, right? And then that means that, those people eventually going to outnumber you. I mean, that's the definition of when you're trying to run a massive production operation, right? And you want cheap labor. You need lots of heads. That means that they're going to outnumber you, right? This is what happened in the South when you had more black slaves than you had white people, right? There were certain areas that they had huge black populations. You got one plantation, and with 5 white men on the plantation and 100 slaves, you're outnumbered, right? But I'm saying, so they'll complain about demographics, but they want cheap labor, right? They'll complain about, low wages, but they want cheap labor, right? They'll complain about, what else will they complain about? They'll complain about low birth rates, but they'll be renting properties. They'll be a property, not I'm a property manager, property owner. They'll own an apartment complex or something, but they're charging $2,000 rent. But then they'll complain about, the white birth rates are low. Of course they're going to be low. And especially when you put on all the high standards that white people have for themselves, you know, where many of the other people that are used to prolonged exposure to poverty, they'll have kids in poor situations. Black people will have kids in poor situations. Hispanic people will have kids in poor situations. White people are like, I'm not doing that, because that's dust. That brings them too close to proximity to blacks and Hispanics and, you know, other groups and whatnot. So they won't have kids. You know, and then if you want to make a moral argument, I mean, there's no way for people who have discipline to out reproduce people who lack discipline. You see, so your numbers are going to go down regardless by default. You know, but the thing is, you know, now some white nationalists will jump up and they'll say, you know, morality is only for friends. You know, the social programs that we have and shit, they should only go to white people. This is what they try to do, you know, in the South when it came to after they integrated. Like, they didn't want black people swimming in white people's pools, so they would rather put cement in the pools. Right? They didn't want black people getting the same education as white people. So, you know, when they tried to integrate the schools, white people went and, you know, claimed it a Catholic school and said it was private and put the name St. Mary's on it or some shit like that. And then the black people couldn't go to those schools. Right? But the thing is the only white people that really got to truly do that were the white people who were wealthy. Part of the problem in this country is that too many poor white people, poor and working class white people, identify with the class that they're not a part of. They desperately want to be in the upper classes of white people. But I don't know, for whatever reason, they're not there. You know, they want to blame everything else in the world. You know, but again, like Richard Spencer said, you know, we're still in decline. Yeah, because you've let the rhetoric go so far that you undercut yourself. There's white people, they would rather blow everything up than to have, you know, I don't know, a sort of system where I have healthcare and he has healthcare. I have full medical and dental, he's got full medical and dental. I got a secure, protected, unionized job, and he's got a secure, protected, and unionized job. They only want that shit for white people. And so essentially nothing gets done. You know, the fucking white elites go up there. They tell, the blacks is the boogeyman, right? And the proletariat white people, they believe that all social programs only benefit just black people, and they vote against it. They vote against their own interest. They don't have anything, you know, and then you just end up with like, they start whittling their own position. Like they're sitting there bitching about what poor blacks are doing or what poor any other group are doing, right? You know, there's some whites in there, but they focus on the black people. And I'm like looking at them, I'm like, motherfucker, you're in the same boat. And they'll be sitting there like, I got a good job, I got this, I got that. You know what I mean? But when you really look at their portfolio, like, they're like one paycheck away from falling in the same boat, but they take pride in the fact that they're still a paycheck above drowning. You know, and this is how these people think. This is their mentality. You can't get anything done. You know, and once I realized, like, even by the time I got done writing, you know, the freaking Understanding White Supremacy, by the time I got done, I was just like, y'all keep focusing on the wrong shit. The white elite are screwing you over. You got black fatigue, you need to have white elite fatigue. But you don't. You know, they're just floating around online, just constantly bitching about black people. Keep bringing up, you know, Arena Zarutska. I'm like, why don't you pay for the fucking mental health? He should have been institutionalized. I'll gladly pay taxes to keep the crazies off the street. Gladly. But you don't want to do that. What they want is they want nothing to cost them. And it simply does not work like that. You know, you want intact homes. You know, it's like they want to go back to like some like, you know, some like sort of like a freaking, you know, Tartarian. What did the person say? What was it called? Something Nuevo or something like that. Somebody told me it's before Art Deco. Like that turn of the century, the 1890s to probably like the 1910s, you know, in terms of like how everything was grandiose, you know, and you had like Grand Central Station and all the architecture and design and everything. All that shit was paid for. You know what I'm saying? And then instead, all you get is this brutalist architecture. Cement slabs, you know, this sort of communist, cold, you know, fucking... What movie depicted a brutalist style? I'm trying to think of a movie that was like brutalist. You know, there was that Spanish movie where they had the prison, but that was in a prison, so that doesn't count. The one with the levels and shit, that doesn't count. You know, but problem is white people don't have class consciousness. They keep running around with this like we're white people and we're well behaved and it's all these others and these others are the problem because they don't share the same culture as us and the same worldview. How would they share the same culture and worldview as you if white people are disproportionately hoarding all the wealth? I'm not saying you have all the wealth. I'm saying white people as a collective have all the wealth. And most of it is funneled into like, you know, whatever the top like 1%. They have all the wealth. And you act as little guard dogs and soldiers protecting their fucking wealth, but yet you can't even have the 1950s model because they've hoarded so much. So you're sitting there, you got less than what your fucking grandfather, your great grandfather has. And you're up there talking about preservation of white civilization, even without the other minorities, even without any other group in America. In order for you to get what your grandfather or great grandfather got would require a redistribution of the wealth from the white elites to the white proletariat. Even if you got rid of all the blacks, all the Hispanics, all the Asians, you know, all the Muslims, okay, wave the magic wand, poof, they're all gone. You still got a wealth inequality problem. Like y'all act like the white elites are like holding all the money and you want them to hold all the money for safekeeping. And you're like, okay, as soon as we get rid of all these other people, then you all can let go of the money and let it trickle down on us like pee. I'm like, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. They're hoarding it because they want to hoard. They're not holding all that money for safekeeping because, you know, they're trying to make sure that you don't get robbed by the blacks. That's not what they're doing. No, they're the ones that are robbing you, dumbass. They're the ones that are stealing from you, stupid. Damn. And y'all just do not fucking get it. Y'all do not get it. Y'all keep running around with this moral compass bullshit. And again, history shows that white people are anything but the fucking moral compass. Bunch of savages. Like I've said, you know, they're pathological. Your behavior is pathological. And you don't even have a understanding or grasp how your own system works. You don't even understand or comprehend how your own system fucking works. Capitalism is an exploitative system. You know what I mean? Y'all think that they want to pay you because they want to see more heteronormative, cisgendered, white supremacist, Christian nuclear families and shit. No, the fuck they don't. They don't care where they get the bodies from. There's no difference between slaves and robots. And they're trying to replace you with robots. And again, when it comes to cheap labor, I mean, that's as close to a slave as you can get to being a slave without being a slave. You know what I mean? I mean, these people really run around with the idea that you should be happy to put food on the table. And now they're trying to get you to go off to Iran, you know, to go sacrifice your bodies, you know, for the fucking little hats. Black people ain't doing that, but you got black fatigue. Black people ain't picking fights around the globe and shit, but you got black fatigue. Black people aren't the ones that why your gas prices are $4, but you got black fatigue. Black people aren't the reason why rent is $2,000, but you got black fatigue. Black people aren't the reason why freaking daycare is $2,000 per child, but you got black fatigue. Black people aren't the reason why freaking college education now costs like $100,000 to go to a fucking 4-year institution, but you got black fatigue. Black people aren't the ones that are doing the hiring or the firing like Oracle and laying off 30,000 people, but you got black fatigue. Black people aren't the ones that told you that big fat lie about how they're going to put tariffs on the shit and then they're going to refund everybody the motherfucking tariffs when they only refunded it to the goddamn companies, which are already people who are already wealthy, but you got black fatigue. I mean, goddamn, $400,000 homes. Like black people have anything to do with that. We don't even live in those communities, but you got black fatigue. You guys are idiots. You're idiots. And that's how I felt by the time I got done writing the book. I'm like, these people cannot be helped. When people say America is done, it's done. And it's done because of white people's own stupidity. They're stupid. They're legitimately stupid when it comes to this shit. You cannot get them to see this. And they run around, they look at all this low-level crime and shit like that. Oh, the motherfucker stole some razors for Walmart. So the fuck what? If there was any sort of economic parity in this country, you wouldn't see that. The reason why the 1950s looked like the way that it does wasn't because it was a bunch of white people. No, it looked the way that it does was because Europe was bombed to hell. Freaking China wasn't a player. Japan was bombed to hell. United States had its infrastructure fully intact, and the rest of the world needed to rebuild. And the United States came out on top because everybody was buying shit from the United States. And that's what it was. You know, if you wanted a car, you got it from Detroit. But then, again, competition ends up rising, right? First, it started with BMW and Mercedes-Benz. Now, BMW and Mercedes-Benz are seen as more luxury than any American vehicle in America. Who let that happen? Right? You got Hyundai and freaking Honda and who else? What else? What other? I remember when people used to make fun of the Honda accent, right? The Hyundai accent. Remember that? You know, that was like the Geo Metro and shit. In any event, you know, they came in with the cheap cars, right? What's other reliable car? Toyota, right? These are Japanese cars. When go Google and look up when these cars came in. I remember when these cars came into the country. They were a joke. People thought they were a joke. Okay, now they're seen as far more reliable. You go and you look at the Kelley Blue Book, you know, they're at the top of the list of reliability. You did that. Black people didn't do that, but you got black fatigue. You did that. Actually, what's his name? Edward Deming, you know, heavily helped, you know, contribute with getting Japan's, you know, quality control under control. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying, I'm like, y'all did that. Okay, you open up the doors, you know, the white elite at the top. Hell, look at the deal that they had. And I talk about this in the book between Mitsubishi and fucking, who was it? Was it Mitsubishi and Ford? You know what I mean? They had something where they were making parts and stuff like that, right? You know, like they had it was even Chrysler. Chrysler, I think it was like 2001 Sebring and the 2001 Mitsubishi Eclipse were virtually identical. Those two cars were identical, down to the fucking vents. Okay? You know, so they've been trying to find ways, companies are finding ways to cut costs. Don't care about you and your little white family and shit like that. They want to cut costs. Employees are a goddamn expense. And if they can go to China and go and pay people to put together an iPhone in a fucking sweatshop and not pay your ass, not saying that you even want to do that type of work. But the fact of the matter is there's a reason why there's no factory jobs in America like that. There's documentaries on YouTube of like, I even covered that in the video where, you know, I was using the example based off of Undead Chronics video, where you had the guy with he was like a principal of a high school. And he was like, what are these high schoolers going to do? You know, if, you know, I forget what television, it was a TV a company. They made TVs. They couldn't keep up with China. They could not keep up with the cost of the glass and everything. At the end of the day, nobody was going to pay more money for those TVs. And they've already done studies on this. Americans buy the cheapest. They don't buy the absolute most reliable unless you're talking about vehicles. They've already done this. And I mean, I'm talking like no sales. All this made in America, white Americans don't give a fuck about that. They don't. Hell, even MAGA hats are made in China. They don't give a shit about that. They only care about saving more money for themselves. And you can see this. I mean, hell, you could go to any company. You know, even some of these factories. Motherfuckers are I'm pretty sure they try to make a rule or something. You know what I mean? But it's crazy that you got people that might be working at a Ford factory where they make Ford F-150 trucks, and the motherfucker comes rolling up in a Toyota Tundra. The employees that work at the Ford factory riding around in Toyota Tundras. I remember they had this problem when it came to the people were working at Microsoft and they had Apple AirPods in their ear, and that was the issue. You can go and Google it. You work at Microsoft, but you got Apple EarPods in your ear because Microsoft doesn't have an equivalent or superior product. See, I mean, it just says a lot. I mean, look at it for what it is. Go down the highway and look at how many Japanese cars you see versus American vehicles you see, or foreign vehicles. Just drive around and look. Just tell me when you see a Ford, a Buick, a Chevy in comparison to Japanese vehicles. You know, and the reason why, you know, even with Biden, he put that 100% tariff on the Chinese electric vehicles because they would decimate the American automotive industry. BYD would come through and just let their fucking nuts hang. Because people will go out there and buy these these Chinese vehicles for 20 grand a pop, which, especially in a bad economy, is actually something that they could afford. They can afford to get into one of those vehicles as opposed to getting into any of these other American vehicles that are gas powered that they want, you know, you to pay $700 car payments with insurance. I don't think that there's any hope in helping white people, like helping get their minds right. Even so that we can get to a point where they just leave black people the fuck alone. You know, the idea that white people think that they're going to, I don't care, like, whether white people are talking about other white people or talking about black people or whoever else, you're never going to get a bunch of well-behaved poors. You're never going to have a society where people are going without and you somehow think that you deserve a bunch of well-behaved people. Nah, motherfucker, bitch, get carjacked. Get motherfucking carjacked. You know, again, if it ain't the crash outs, you know, I'm telling you, organized white male crime is coming back. It's going to come back. You know, you are going to start seeing, you know, white males, you know, doing the whole Al Capone thing. That's coming back. You know what I mean? When you start seeing white guys getting blown away, you know, on some Angelina Bruno type of shit with his mouth open in his car and shit like that. When you start seeing shit like that, that's how you know. That's how you know. You know, when they start, you know, having to pop people because somebody who's also in the criminal world tried to fuck them over who's white. When you start hearing stories about, you know, 5 people in the house were all executed, lined up and executed. When you start hearing about some Valentine's Day massacres and shit, right? Because they're in the street. Now, it might be different because back then they didn't have RICO charges. Now the feds are throwing football numbers. But, you know, again, you know, just as I say, you know, survival does not wait for assimilation, you know, and survival does not wait for the job market to correct itself. People are going to do what they got to do to eat. The white women, they're already doing what they got to do to eat, which is why you see 66% of them, you know, being the 66% of the OnlyFans models being white women. You know, they're going up there, you know, getting money however they can get money. And that's another thing. Like, you cannot, like, you know, when you're trying to uphold standards, you can uphold standards. What the hell is dead? Something must be dead. You can uphold standards when people's basic needs are met. And you can say, well, why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't you doing that? Because not only do you have something to take away, but you can uphold it. You can uphold it. I'm looking at all these damn birds and shit like that. I don't know why they're just floating around. But anyway, you can hold it. What am I saying? You can uphold standards, you know, when people's basic needs are met. When people's basic needs are met, you know what I mean? The society's working and everything. Right? There's a robust reward system. If you behave in a way that the society deems to be, you know, the appropriate way, then you're heavily rewarded. If the society has to keep up its end of the bargain as well. It can't then just be, a one-dimensional thing or one-directional thing. Go to college, get an education, and you'll be squarely in the middle class. This country, you're gonna turn a whole bunch of computer science majors into some fucking hackers. Okay, you're gonna create Fight Club. You're gonna create that shit, right? Because if y'all don't, Fight Club wasn't really about the Fight Club. The most important part about the Fight Club is where they blew up the fucking servers that had everybody's fucking credit scores on them. That was the crucial part, when they blew up those buildings where the servers are at. You see, they were dismantling the system. So I'm just saying, a lot of white men, they get into this moral bullshit, and it's like, and I guess that's the last thing that they do, because it's the weakest thing that they can do. It's weak. It's weak. They try to make all these appeals to a higher power, or it's God, and it's because we took Christ out of the school. No, you took the money out of the family. That's what you did. Your system, you allowed your system of white leadership and white capitalists to take money out of the hands of white families. That's what you did, including everybody else. That's why nothing feels like it works anymore. That's why the society feels low trust. Like, the idea, it's not just about the concept of this purity culture of behavior. That's bullshit. No. People don't steal when they're well fed. People don't steal when they're taken care of. I don't need to steal anything from a store that I already got because I already ordered it. I'm not looking to steal razors because I got plenty of razors. I got a ton of them. I got a ton of them at home, for shaving and whatnot. But but if I'm broke and Gillette is talking about $35 for some fucking razors, guess what I might do? You see? So instead of looking at it like, it's because it's in their DNA and they're morally reprehensible, all this bullshit. No. Why don't you set up a system to where people don't struggle to be able to afford razors? Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I know that would just be too much of the right thing to do. I'm sorry. What was I thinking? But you're not gonna get a fucking high trust society when people are disproportionately broke. You can try to push that on the black people. Okay, you ain't trying to live in Appalachia either, motherfucker. You ain't trying to live in rural America in fucking McDowell County, West Virginia either. High trust society. Fuck out of here. I didn't already talked to the one guy that grew up in coal mining country. He talked about the shit. He got a bunch of kleptomaniacs in his family because they're all fucked up. They're on meth. He has to hide shit. They can't keep shit out because when his cousins come over and shit like that, they'll just steal shit and then go take it to the local pawn shop and try to pawn it off. Motherfuckers be sitting around talking about, where's my pocket knife? Where's my ma? You see my pocket knife? Was Cletus here? God damn it. You know what I mean? And then they all mad, running outside, slamming his Ford F-150 truck and shit like that. Literally going up to the pawn shop to repurchase back his fucking pocket knife. Shit like that. Because motherfucker wanted to pawn it to get some drug money so he can go and do some drugs. Which again goes back to the escapism. People do drugs when they're trying to escape reality. Why is the system that you set up, the reality that you set up, so fucked up that people are trying to escape it? You got people running around, Andrew Tate, I'm trying to escape the Matrix. The Matrix. In other words, this system, people just want to make money. They want to make so much money that they can then go off and do whatever the fuck they want to do. And that could actually live life. Because basically life is a prison. Your mortgage is a prison. All this stuff is a prison. Everything you got to pay for is a prison. Subscription-based society. Right? Like you're like there's the earth provides all that there is, enough for everybody to just live. But no, you can't live that, because we have a thing known as landlords, which harkens back to what? The feudal period. So you don't own the land, somebody else owns the land, and you have to pay them in order to, use the land. And the crazy thing is, you don't really even own it, unlike in other countries where you actually own the land outright. Where here, yeah, oh yeah, you own it until you don't pay your property taxes. So one disease, one sickness, and again, healthcare is privatized, right? So you lose your job, one disease, one sickness, one payment that just throws you overboard, and then, you're going to lose, your house, you lose your car, you're going to lose everything. And then you'll be sitting there looking. And then people will be blaming you and saying that, that America's not like a casino. The problem is the fact that, that you have some sort of moral or character flaw. And that's a good way to put it, because America is a casino, right? The casino is in the business of winning, right? The casino is not in the business of you winning and walking with your money. So what do? You can stay here for free. That's the funny thing. This casino is actually smarter in getting people locked into the ecosystem than a lot of aspects of America. I'd say the closest thing to a casino would probably be, the AI models that are typically free or very low fee. So they get you to go in there, train the system and everything, and then use the system to replace you. Again, all of this is brought out. Everything that's going on in society. This is white civilization. This is what white civilization does. White civilization, goes and meets its peak with this infinite growth model, to the point that it's not even conducive to reproduction. And now you got all these white nationalists online. They're mad at the other races that don't operate on the white man system, because the white man system destroys even the white man. But it's everybody else's fault. They got Indian fatigue, Asian fatigue, Muslim fatigue, black fatigue, Latino fatigue. I'm like, you need to have fatigue for that goddamn AI. You need to have fatigue for the white elites that don't want to pay anybody. I mean, there's nothing but white people up there trying to implement all this shit, acting like they're taking things into the future. It's fucked up. And there are other non-white groups that are adopting the white man's model because they're trying to stay competitive in a global capitalist market. But I'm just saying, clearly we can see it's not conducive to, people reproducing. You see this, in China. Same thing. Birth rates on the floor. They're projected to disappear. Germany is projected to disappear. Korea's projected to disappear. Japan's projected to disappear. Because you set up a society that is not conducive to reproduction and family formation and people actually living life and not feeling like they're in a constant meat grinder. That's your doing. Western civilization is based off of white philosophy, white male philosophy. So you got to own that. Don't run away from it now, because y'all love to grab on history. Yeah, all that, these inventions of the past, that was us. As soon as we get into the negatives and the transgressions and the things that implicate you when it comes to the crimes against humanity, then all of a sudden, I'm a goddamn individual. I ain't got nothing to do with that. So y'all like to flip-flop. Things that make you feel good about yourself, you want to say that was us. Things that make you feel bad about yourself, you want to be an individual. You know what I'm saying? We pulled your number. We pulled your bitch ass number. We know who the fuck you are. We know how you think. We know how you move. We know about all of your philosophical inconsistencies. Why are there so many immigrants in the UK? Maybe because you went around the globe and you wanted to have a global empire. That's what comes with empire. That's like Darth Vader being on a starship with like Wookiee soldiers and shit like that and being like, why are there so many Wookiees? Like, motherfucker, like, didn't you go down to the forest planet and shit like that? And if you don't know about the Wookiees, like the Wookiees, I think they were like genetically modified by like a other superior race to be like to be like I don't know, they were like some type of slave to like grow the crops or maintain the forest or some shit like that. I forget what it was. But if you go into Star Wars, I'm pretty sure that's where the Wookiee race comes from. I just don't have it in front of me right this moment. Hold on, let me. What am I talking about? I don't have it right in front of me. I do. I have the power of AI. Hold on. What is the origin of the Wookiee race in Star Wars? Same thing with the Predators. The Predators were like slaves and shit like that. The Wookiees are a fictional species created in Star Wars. The home world, what's it called? Cassiac? I don't know how to say it. A dense forest planet filled with massive warsher trees where they build cities high above the ground. Wookiees are known for their height, strength, loyalty, most famously represented by Chewbacca. As for their origin in the universe, Wookiees are naturally evolved species, native kind of. Over time, they develop advanced social structures, technology, strong warrior culture. Despite their power, they were enslaved by the Galactic Empire during the reign of the Emperor Palpatine and forced into labor, particularly during construction of the Death Star. Okay, so this is saying that they were enslaved, that they weren't created to be slaves. I'm mixing up what was that shit? The most awesomest freaking Star Wars game ever. What was that game back in the fucking 90s? What was that shit called? Maybe it was the early 2000s. I think it was early 2000s. What's the game called? Fucking Star Wars. Oh, with fucking Darth Revan. What was that shit called? Oh, what was it called? Hold on. Star Wars. What was it? Knights Order? What was it called? Knights of the Old Republic. The most fantastic, epic Star Wars game ever. Now, I didn't play Star Wars Jedi First Order. I have it. I downloaded it. But like I mean I have it. I installed it, but I didn't play it. I've been stuck on Division 2. That's my shit right now. Going through the whole cherry blossom thing and trying to finish out my journey. But yeah, I'm just saying. Anyway, getting off topic. But I'm just saying. White people, like white men, it's fucked up because their whole argument is like really disingenuous, right? They want to be in a position where, they understand that there's white elites, but they want to be, on the John F. Kennedy lifestyle, ignoring the fact that fucking John F. Kennedy's father was a fucking bootlicker, or not bootlicker, boot. What do you call that shit? A bootlicker, a moonshiner, whatever you call it. Bootlegger. I said bootlicker, bootlegger, bootlegger. Yeah, he was a bootlegger. You know what I mean? And what's funny is he's the one, if you go and watch that documentary, Hollywoodism, John F. Kennedy's father, or was it his grandfather? I think it was his father, was sent to tell the Jewish people to stop making videos trying to instigate and get the United States involved in World War II, in talking about the Holocaust. Because he basically went over there and shook things up and basically told them that the president was going to blame them for getting us in the war if they didn't shut the fuck up. It's in the documentary of Hollywoodism. It's in there. You can go watch it. It's over there on the Real Black, and you can watch it for free. You know what I mean? But they don't understand how the system works. And then, even if they did, they still want to maintain position. They do not want anybody else to be up relative to them. They're like, well, it basically, if I can't have it all, then no one will. And that's what they're on. And that's why I was like, it's not fixable. It's not fixable. If you ask me, in the majority of this, white men are the problem. These young white men are a problem. I get the idea, that they're mad because, they want what they were promised. They thought that the system of white supremacy was going to be passed on to them. That's what they thought. And they're not pivoting and recognizing they're trying to get back to white supremacy. But what they're not recognizing is that it's really class warfare at this point. It's not white supremacy. It's elite white supremacy. That's what you're up against. All they did was, it's like when you're playing freaking Call of Duty and they you're playing Call of Duty and they close the ring. You know, that little ring, or you're playing, is it Apex? Yeah, I think Apex has that. Apex Legends, and the ring closes and the ring is closing and closing and closing. I don't like battle royales. I was a classic Battlefield guy. I like front lines. I don't like getting shot in the back. You know what I mean? I'm like, there was nobody over there. Now all of a sudden I'm getting shot in the back. That's what I hate about Call of Duty. I like Battlefield because Battlefield had front lines. But in any event, I'm saying, the ring is closing and they close the ring. And so the amount of white people who get to enjoy what was essentially promised, the system of white supremacy that was promised, the amount they get to enjoy that is ever smaller. And so, again, and this goes back to one of the white guys that came over on my page, and I think I think it was a white guy. I think it was a black guy who said it, but a white guy co-signed it. He was like, basically white men went outside, and the white elites changed the doors on them, changed the locks on the door. And when they came back to the house, the door was locked. They were like, hey, let me back in the mansion. You know what I mean? The motherfucker up there, a shadowy figure, opens up the curtains, and then you see the shadowy figure throw the curtains back and walk away from the window. Like, y'all got locked outside. That's what happened. That's why you mad. You mad because you outside with the niggas. That's why they mad. They mad because they outside with the niggas. They mad as fuck. I'm like, I fucking told you. We try to tell you. Try to tell you during the Gilded Age. Stokely Carmichael tried to tell you during the 1960s. You know what I'm saying? Like, we try to tell y'all. Y'all motherfuckers don't listen. You guys suck at listening. But so now we're here. You know what I mean? And now, again, the worst part about being a white male is the fact that, and this is where white men fuck up, because instead of you all separating, distinguishing yourselves, you want to be that white man on Mount Olympus. You want to be that guy. But the thing is all you end up with none of the power, none of the wealth, none of the prestige. And now all you're getting is just the reputation of all the damage that white elite men have done. Like Donald Trump and all the shit that he's doing. That's your ass. That's your ass. If you can't tell me that if Obama wasn't up there, right? Even though this man is biracial, if Obama was up there and the economy was just all type of fucked up and everything was just imploding all over the place, and the Strait of Hormuz was blocked off and gas was $4 a gallon and everything, you can't tell me that y'all wouldn't sit there and start making all type of content talking about, see, and this is why we can't have black male leadership, because the niggas and the low IQs and they don't know what they're doing and blah, 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 blah. That's what y'all would be saying. But somehow when a white man's up there and he's fucking shit up, we can't say that. We can't call that out. We can't be like, the high IQs, ladies and gentlemen, the high IQs. This motherfucker doesn't even know how to get out. I mean, this is hilarious watching Trump up there, and Iranians agreed to this. Iranians get online, they're like, we ain't agreed to shit. Fuck that motherfucker. Like, that shit is hilarious. That shit is hilarious. He up there at 2 o'clock in the morning tweeting shit out. Like they give a fuck after you done killed 170 of their girls and shit. Like they give a fuck. You know what I mean? Like, just the arrogance. The arrogance is just crazy. Hubris, my friend. Hubris. But, this is where we are. I don't have any real hope. So, y'all want to check out my book, lay it out, for future generations to fucking read and, know what's up, know what time it is with these folks and their mindset, how they think. somebody try to call me Nelly Fuller, man. I ain't no Nelly Fuller. I'm definitely not on that level. I'm nowhere near on that level. Maybe if I ever make it to 90 years old, I might be on that level and shit like that. But right now, nah, I ain't on that level. Nowhere near. But, yeah, so anyway, that's all I got for y'all. That's my video, SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe. The book, the actual physical book is coming. I just got to I gotta, make sure, what do you want to call it? I got to get my own copy because I got to make sure, that it looks right, that it presents right, the materials are right, I was thinking of going because if you go and you buy the digital version, the Kindle version, if you buy that version, you don't have to have Kindle in order to get it. Like you can, it'll just show up as like a fucking PDF file that can't be like fucking copied or whatever. But in any event, like there's a bunch of colored images in there and shit like that. But the cost-effective way is to do it with the, the black and white images. But I got to see, how they turn out. Because if the images are too dark or too blacked out, I got to figure all that out. But I'm thinking, because the cost of the book, like I'll tell you exactly what it is. So basically I'll get like $7 a book for every book that people buy. The book itself, in order to have that, to keep it like in line with the other stuff, like per copy, I'd have to make the book like $25. So y'all gotta let me know, $25 sound fine to you, because since Amazon prints the book, I end up, they gotta cover the cost of printing the book. So it's like, they take, what would that be like a freaking a fourth of that, a quarter of that, something like that. So, I mean, that's just where I'm at right now. But so it'll be up soon. I just need to make sure that everything's right. I went with the gloss cover. I want to make sure that the cover is like, I want to see what that looks like. I want to see what the gloss looks like, instead of the matte black, because there's like different options in there. But you guys can't see it on your end. I can see it on my end, obviously, because you got to basically set up your account. And, if you're selling stuff online, here's the funny thing. I actually have a kid's coloring book I made too. I made a kid's coloring book with the alphabet, because I have one of my neighbors, they just had not just had a baby, but they have a baby, and then they have a toddler, and then like the toddler, like he's like coloring and whatnot. And I mean, that motherfucker was going through coloring books like crazy. And I was like, why don't you just use AI and make coloring books and shit like that? So I made a coloring book with the alphabet and all that other stuff to help him with the alphabet. Like, O is for orangutan and all that. So I did all that shit. So I'm thinking about putting that together and just putting that on there. So if people got kids, even though SWP don't really have nothing to do with the children's, but I'm saying, I haven't set that up yet, but it's easy to do. It's so easy to do. It's not even funny. But anyway, that's all I got. So I might sell that for like, I don't know, $2.99 maybe. I think I probably got to sell it more than that for the physical book. Or you could just have actually, I don't know how you would do that, even if it was a freaking Kindle, because you can't color in a Kindle. How the fuck would you do that? It would have to be a coloring book. It would have to be a physical book, because they got a color in it. Yeah. I wish it was like a coloring book that you could have that was like a PDF, like an app that you could like have it where people could color it, like the kids could color it, like, and just like kind of like I'm sure they have an app like that or something like that, but I'm just sitting there thinking about it. But yeah, I did that. So they had fun with it. I was just trying to see like what type of shit I could do with AI, what I could do with, creating images and stuff like that. And it's only getting progressively better. So I'm like, hey, So anyway, that's all I got for y'all. That's my video, SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe.
On the scene, diamond blaney, whole screen, checkerboard, Louis V. I'm so fresh and so clean. Stepped trigger, let it sing. Then gon' smoke a Russian cream.
Move. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hello?
We ain't.
Where we at? Oh, you want to know where I'm at? We outside!